All right, everybody, welcome back to the Combat Chain. I'm your host, Patrick Shaw, here in the East Coast United States with plenty of daylight and perfect temperatures, bringing you a new episode of the pod. Today is a special day for me because I'm joined by not one, but two Pro Tour competitors. First, he was 76th in Lille, but number one in our hearts. You can find this tall glass of milk if you look for the big orange hat in the crowd, usually tossing around too many rune chants for any person to handle. He's my co-host, staying up way past his bedtime for the sake of content. Adam Philipchuk. Adam, say hello.
Hey, how's it going, Pat?
Fantastic. How is France?
France is great. Pro Tour was great. We are, my girlfriend and I are just spending a couple extra days in Paris now. We've been bumming around the city, hanging out in parks, eating baguettes. It's been a great time.
Excellent to hear. Second, with us today, we have the man who was literally number one in Lille, a man whose biceps and ability to fearlessly add color to his wardrobe garnered almost as much attention to his transcendent victory in Lille, France. He is the reigning UK national champion and can now add Pro Tour champion to the flesh and blood accolades. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Foulkes. Matthew, welcome to the Combat Chain.
Good evening, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wrote that by myself, so Adam had no idea what was
going on. That was well said.
I might get my girlfriend to call me that every single time she ever addresses me, you know?
Yeah.
Every time I walk into a room, just that. All of it start to finish, you know?
Excellent. Glad to hear. Matthew, we want to thank you for taking the time and coming on to the podcast with us. So it was clear during your match how excited you were while you were on your way to winning the Pro Tour. But now that the dust has settled a bit, what is going through your mind right now?
It's been a bit surreal because, like, you don't really ever expect to have a result that insane, you know? Like, as a competitive card tournament player, you dream of it, and, you know, you really want to achieve that, and that's all you think about, you know. But, like, how often do you get to really win a tournament? Like, you almost always, like, a good result is still a top 8, or, you know, a semi-final, or a quarter final, or just even a top 16 or a requeue, any of that. Like, it's almost never ever that, like, the tournament just ends, because it's almost always something else you qualify for, or, you know, there's another tournament after, or there's a thing beyond that. And it's just like, oh my god, I got to the thing and I just did the thing and then it was done. There's nothing after that, you know. I mean, there's worlds, but it was like, it's still a bit difficult to process. That there's nothing like that. I just absolutely just rank one finished it. Just did the thing to the maximal degree. But now that I'm a few days removed, I'm kind of just thinking, like, okay, now I've done that. Like, where do I go from here? Like, what's the next tournament? Which is kind of incredibly degenerate, but, like, I know that I have nationals coming up in 3 weeks, and I have a nationals title to defend. So, like, I was thinking today, like, I was just sat there, like, having dinner, and I just thought, man, I really want to win my nationals, you know? Like, wouldn't it be awesome if I won nationals again? Like, and maybe that's a bit greedy, because, like, I think it's completely unreasonable to have expectations to win any tournament. Like, I go to even just my armory, you don't expect to win, right? Like, Flesh and Blood is hard, and it's a card game like any with variants. You need to be insanely lucky to win, you know, and I was repeatedly insanely lucky to win the Pro Tour, and also to have won my nationals last year as well. Like, you know, even as, like, late as the last turn of the last game, you know, I for anyone who hasn't seen the game, I have to play a Sonata on my last turn, and I have to hit or I lose the game. Like I said, you can see me, like, desperately thinking over it in the last turn, trying to work out if there's any way I don't have to basically flip a coin, you know, a slightly weighted in my favor coin, but basically flip a coin for, you know, in excess of $10,000, and, you know, maybe more important, at least to me, than the money is, like the accolade of actually winning the Pro Tour, and I can't. And, so I just had to pray, pray to some kind of higher power that it was my day. And I said to my opponent, I said, it is here. It's right now. Good luck, mate. And then I flipped the cards off the Sonata and, could barely keep it together when I saw a yellow belittle. Well, actually, it wasn't the yellow belittle that sent me over the edge. It was the blue Tome of the Arknight. It was the Tome of the Arknight that came second on the flip to know that I had then definitely won the Pro Tour.
To guarantee that hit.
Yeah. And then I almost fumbled it. I really almost fumbled it. It wouldn't actually ended up costing me the game, but so my plan when I cast the Sonata was I knew any hit allows me to go make an embodiment of lightning, attack with my overload, pitch my overload, or pitch my other card, weapon swing for 2 arcane, which was enough to kill him with the 1 damage from the Sonata because he was on 3 and had no arcane barrier. So I knew that any hit would kill him. But I hadn't fully considered Sigil. I hadn't seen how I could lose. I'd only found my way to how I could win. I hadn't then got to this point to ask myself, wait, how can I lose? And so I hit the Sigil and I was like, oh my God, I win. And then managed just to catch myself before I'd finished resolving Sonata or playing the Overload. I was like, wait, we still need to play good, clean Flesh and Blood. Let's not throw this all down the drain at the last possible moment. Because honestly, he didn't have the Sigil. He told me. But if I'd made that mistake and then had lost to the Sigil, like you don't know how you come back from a rough beat like that. That's. Sure. But thankfully, I was able to see it just in time, and yeah,
excellent.
Clean it up.
Was there a moment before that final match where it started becoming real for you that winning the Pro Tour was a possibility? Like, was it getting into the top 8 or some point afterwards?
I think one thing that I'm actually quite good at, and I think people actually tend to do quite wrong, or maybe not quite wrong, but it's a leak for a lot of players. I think is they set a goal that maybe is still really high, but that isn't the finish of the tournament, and then they reach that point, and then something about their tournament changes. You see, for me at least, I see it happen in a lot of tournaments. Right, is you see players say in a calling. I have not made a top 8 calling, but I've seen it in Magic GPs and other tournaments. They make the top 8, right? And everyone's so happy. We just qualified for the Pro Tour. This is amazing. This is great. And it is a great result. It's amazing. But for me, what's most important is in that moment that you don't think, cool, I did the thing. What's the most important is that you now focus on the 3 most important matches of your tournament, which lie in front of you, So I actually tweeted the exact same thing I did when I top 8'd UK Nationals as I did when I top 8'd the Pro Tour, which is it's a clip from an interview with Kobe Bryant, where it's a clip from the NBA Finals, a post game interview from the NBA Finals, where they're 2-0 up. The Lakers are 2-0 up. And they ask him, when are we going to get a smile, Kobe? And he's like, why would I smile? They're like, you're 2-0 up in the final. And he's like, is the match finished? I don't think so, So for me, I literally in the past have asked people not to congratulate me. UK Nationals, I said, please, I was 12-0. And I said, please don't congratulate me.
Yep.
Because I'm not finished. I still have 3 very important matches to play, and then please congratulate me. And so for me, the only thing that mattered was my next opponent, and I played, yeah. like obviously my goal and like my extreme focus is to win the tournament, but I made sure like I don't like at any point like relax and say, awesome, I did it. I'm really happy with my performance. If I lost, I'll be disappointed, and that happens. I'd still be insanely happy with my weekend. Had I lost the final, I would have been, I'm sure, crushed in the moment, just absolutely devastated. But then I'm sure by now I would have come to terms with how amazing of a weekend that would have been for me. But one thing I really, really try hard not to do, because I used to do it and have done it in the past, is say a top 8 is a great result for you, you get that result, and instead of really focusing on what a great opportunity you now have, you just maybe you let off the gas a little bit. You accept, wow, I've done really great, and then you lose a bit of that focus, you lose a bit of that intensity, and I really didn't want to do that. So for me, it didn't really become real until the final match finished. Then I was like, oh my God, I just won the Pro Tour.
That's an excellent perspective. All right, a couple things that had the audience buzzing during your appearance in the top 8 were your arms and your shirt, which brings me to our first community question by Sean Hill, a fellow Pro Tour competitor, who asks, how do you get so fucking yoked?
I lift a lot of weights. I actually have I have Yuanji. I have Yuanji Lee here with me today. He's staying with me for a couple of days after the Pro Tour, and I actually forced him into the gym today. He had a bit of a tough time. I think he was on the verge of death maybe at one point, but he got through it, and we put him through a pretty good workout. And I was considering that an off day, I tend to just push myself really hard in the gym. I work out like 6 days a week, and I eat a lot of protein. Nothing too iconic, but I just try and be consistent, because like whenever I've gone through tough times in my life, like whenever I've like experienced like actually really rough and hard times, it's always been like weightlifting has been the thing that's kind of anchored me in like being able to be a human being.
The iron never lies, right? Henry Rollins.
Exactly. Like I struggle a lot with like procrastination, and like I suffer pretty badly with ADHD. Like sometimes I just like lose weeks. Like I just won't have done anything productive for like an entire week. And like, but I'll always go to the gym. And so it's like I can't have really messed up my week that bad as long as I nailed the gym, and that keeps me like on some path. So yeah.
What's your preferred workout method? Are you more of a free weights guy? Are you a circuit guy?
Yeah, I mostly train in like a powerlifting style. I guess I'll just drop some numbers.
Let's go. What do you got?
I have about a 540-pound deadlift.
Wow.
All right.
About 440-pound squat, and about a 330-pound. A 315 bench. Sorry, I'm trying to do the kilos to pound.
The conversion rate, yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit different, but that's So like I've been training like pretty seriously for a long time. But I mean, we're not here to talk about weightlifting.
We're going to talk about whatever comes up. No, that's impressive numbers.
Yeah, that's super impressive.
Yanji, how did you feel about the workouts today?
Pretty tired.
I saw a video on Twitter getting some squats in. Your depth was good. He was
nailing it, dude. He was nailing it. I ain't worked out in like 3 years. I was like, nah, you're crushing it, bro. You are crushing it. I was really impressed. He worked hard, especially because he's under the weather as well. So like, shout out to you, Angie. He put a shift in considering he was struggling.
That's awesome.
Excellent. That's the way to do it. All right. Moving on. So we talked about your arms. Let's talk about your shirts. How much thought and effort go into your style and wardrobe for a major card tournament?
I think in general, I look often about the biggest slob possible at card tournaments. I tend to almost take pride in putting as little thought into the decisions around the tournament as possible, because I want all of my thought and focus to be on the tournament. But this weekend is, the Pro Tour is a special tournament. You want to be, there's a chance, right? There's a chance that you're on camera, and there's a chance that like you get to look back and remember those times. So like, if that's going to be the case, I feel like you'd want to look pretty good for it, So I made sure to get a haircut on the week before, because I was like, if I'm going to be seeing a bunch of people, I don't want to look like a slob. gave myself a decent shave, and then I said to my girlfriend on Thursday before we drove across, I said I'm gonna pack this shirt and I'm gonna wear it on Sunday. And like I woke up on Friday and I was like, I kind of want to wear the shirt, and I was like, nah, I won't, because I didn't have that many clothes with me. Like I had like 4 outfits or whatever. But and then on the Saturday, I was like, I kind of want to wear the shirt, and I was like, nah, I'm coming back to put it on tomorrow. And then I woke up on Sunday morning and I put that shirt on, and I was like, this feels so good. This feels such like this, and then like now I get to look back at all the photos, and I look really good in them, you know. Like I don't mean that's like a brag, but like I made I was really lucky that like that shirt fits me great. I think like it was actually my stepdad's shirt. He just it didn't fit him. It was way too big for him, and so he just gave it to me like last month because he bought this shirt that just wasn't even close to fitting him, and like that was just the shirt that came with me. But like now I get to look back at all the photos, and I just look sharp, you know. I was dressed for the occasion, and I'm super happy that I did that, you know.
It had definitely left an impression.
For shirt decisions.
You were definitely left a positive impression. That's definitely one of the legacies of Pro Tour Lille will be how well you dressed.
Nice.
All right.
Maybe we'll throw it to a drop. But what you couldn't see, maybe for a lot of the coverage, was that underneath the shirt is just some gym shorts. You know? So it's like
the Zoom call business.
Yeah, business for the top half, chilling on the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
Business in the front, party in the back.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Almost 1 year ago, you went 15-0 on your way to UK Nats, to taking UK Nats on an until then almost unheard of Briar aggro deck. Along the way, you drew the ire of Flesh and Blood fans and others with the weight that they put on your actions during the tournament. Given the comments on forums and during the Pro Tour stream, it seems a reputation as a certain kind of player hasn't quite left you yet. How much are you exposed to that kind of criticism? Does it affect you to this day? And what do you have to say to those fans who think you do not belong in this game?
Yeah, there has obviously been a lot of criticism, and it's actually interesting that you said almost a year ago today, because I was scrolling back through my Twitter just today, and I found a tweet from I think it was the 11th of August, and it was, hey, would anybody interested in playing some tabletop simulator Flesh and Blood with me? And that was the first time I played, basically a year ago today, actually, which was interesting to see how far I've come in that year. But to address the criticism, it does affect me a lot, actually. Like after I won UK Nationals last year, you know, it's not incorrect to say that was and is now still one of the most, like, the proudest days of my life, you know. Like I worked insanely hard for that tournament, and so it felt horrific to walk away from something that you feel insanely proud of and see the overwhelming response to be so negative and, you know, so hateful. And like, while I think that some of my actions at that tournament like are not to a standard that I then and do still hold, I think that basically a lot of the response came from outside of the Flesh and Blood community, from Magic players who already didn't like me and were really looking for basically just another great reason to throw a lot of vitriol my way. And like, dealing with those people is often pretty miserable, because there's a lot of people who are just taking a lot of enjoyment out of basically just trying to tear me down, and that's really rough, because like, it's something like I think it's safe to say that I love the game of Flesh and Blood just about as much as anybody. Like, I put so much time and effort and like thought into the game. I've traveled to like like 5 different countries at this point, I think, to play the game. Like, like, and so to see people that like also care about the same thing as me, just like completely trying to like discredit or like remove like any input or value of like my time and effort and achievements is really upsetting. But like, I do still, like, as I said, understand that some of my actions at that tournament were not okay. So to specifically address, I don't know how much like specifically of the exact situations that occurred at UK Nationals. In one of the games, I play a card, realize I put the wrong card down from my hand, and I take it back. And then the follow-on is that a few turns later, my opponent misses his trigger, and I don't let them have it. I call a judge because they've missed their trigger, which they have. They have missed their trigger, and a lot of people were upset with me because I told my opponent they couldn't have their trigger, and that's not the part that I think is incorrect. The part is that I make a play and then immediately swap it round, and that's the part that I'm not okay with, because I'm a player that believes, if you miss something, it should be missed. Like, you should have to pay the price for your own mistakes. But I don't do that earlier in the game, and that's the part I regret. Because I am and still and will always be a player that is very happy to call a judge if something goes wrong in the game, if that's either my fault or my opponent's. And like just for example, in the top 8 of the PT this weekend, I missed my Channel Mount Heroic trigger. I've done all the work to keep my Channel Mount Heroic around for a third time, setting myself up, and had done a ton of work to set myself up for what was going to be a 3-attack, absolutely insane turn that was almost certainly going to win me the game, because I'd worked through all of my opponent's Arclight Sentinels. And I got so lost in finding the line where I could set up that 4th Arclight Sentinel turn that I just forgot the simple step of putting a counter on my Channel Mount Heroic. And I know what the fix is to that problem. As soon as a judge comes to the table, I look at my Channel Mount Heroic, see only 2 counters, realize the mistake I've made, and I know that the solution is that the Channel Mount Heroic goes away. I didn't protest, I didn't complain. I accept that, that's my mistake, and I should pay the price for my mistake, and I accept that fully. And I, focused up and tried to keep playing on. Thankfully, I didn't pay the price for that mistake, but that's the standard that I try to hold. And anyone that's played me in the last year since then, I make sure to really, really try to hold myself, to the strictest of standards. Like, even on things that are tiny, like where my opponent's like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. I say, no, I don't want it. I don't want it, because I would at least try and hold myself to even a higher standard, especially at like casual tournaments where like it's fine. Like, even at like ProQuest level, like if my opponent misses something like pretty small, it is fine. You can have it as long as we're not like turns down the line. It's not completely egregious, But at the professional level, I think that it's difficult sometimes with missed triggers and judge calls and issues like this, because if we try and work out where the line is on what you can say, oh, that's all right, that's not all right, it's really difficult. So I tend to always draw the line of, if we just call a judge and ask, that's what the line will be, because I find it difficult otherwise, because we're all playing this weird, like, what's the moral line on what's okay and what's not. And if you just call a judge, and this is something I implore basically everyone to do, and I think honestly people don't do enough, if you just call a judge, then you won't always get a perfect judge call, but what you should do is just get at least a fair standard for both players, where both of your like opinions and like thoughts about the situation are heard and can hopefully get the fairest resolution. So that's the standard I approach. And so, like, although it really did hurt, and like I still have to deal with a decent amount of hate, a lot of which comes from like prior to UK Nationals, and I think that will always at least follow me to some extent in like Flesh and Blood. I can't really do a lot about a lot of people's opinions, and so I just try and accept and ignore those people, because I think, if people have made their mind up about me, all I can do is try and like add value to people that do want to interact with me, and continue to try and do my best to play the cleanest, most skilled, most interesting Flesh and Blood that I can. And I think this weekend, hopefully, I did a pretty spectacular job of that. I tried really hard to play a crisp game. I certainly still missed a few triggers here and there. I missed a really, really painful one in the top 8. I think I missed a tunic trigger. But I managed to get through the tournament without having too many issues. And, I had a bunch of amazing games on the way. So, yeah, I think that basically assesses that sort of where I'm at with the criticism. I wish it wasn't there. Like, I wish I didn't have to deal with, hearing the same, like, 3 awful jokes, or just, like, a lot, because I don't mind them if they're funny. If there's humor in them, I can appreciate them, But it's when it's just, like, blind toxic hate that, like, they're not even interested in hearing my perspective or my side of the story, then I that does hurt. That is frustrating.
Well, and I think to your point too, like, it's not the mistakes that define someone, it's your actions that follow the mistakes. And I think with what we just heard you say, it really shows that you're trying to be accountable. And that's really commendable. Like, kudos to you for being able to recognize what went wrong, and then being accountable and moving forward and just trying to be the best person you can be moving forward from that. Like, yeah, kudos to you.
Yeah, I think it bears saying that like I had a lot of messages from people after the Pro Tour, and I think that people are often like very quick to jump to negative conclusions, but then the opposite is also true. Like, I'm still like basically the same player that I was last year at UK Nationals. I'm and I think a lot of the problems from you at UK Nationals came that was I think either my 6th or my 7th ever Flesh and Blood event in real life, and now I'm a lot more experienced, and I make sure to try and be a lot crisper and hold myself to that higher standard. But like, just because like I play one tournament where I don't have any issues, I don't think that people should then massively or dramatically change their opinion of me. I think people are too quick to jump to negative conclusions, but also like, I don't think that they should think that I'm some like saint. I'm still a cutthroat competitive player who wants to win like massively, and I give my absolute everything to win every tournament I'm in. And I just it's a bit like, I'm trying to find the right words to say it. I wish that people would just be a bit more neutral about me. Like, I'm not some hero, I'm not some villain. I'm just another guy that really likes playing Flesh and Blood. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
You're just Switzerland.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to be seen as like a hero or a villain or any of that. Like, I just like playing the game. I just love playing the game.
I think you definitely bring an attitude to the game that I think there's a lot of like fostering, this is going to sound bad, I promise it's not. There's a lot of like fostering positive community and like togetherness and wholesomeness when it comes to the Flesh and Blood community. But one of the big aspects that is missing and can be misconstrued in that is the competitive aspect of the game. There's nothing wrong with being a high level competitor of the game focused on the competition of it, and that comes with some burden of not being the good guy or the nice guy all the time. We talk about playing crisp and making sure people don't miss their triggers, or not allowing someone else's missed trigger cost you in the moments that are most important in those games, and that can be perceived as a potential negative.
Yeah, and I don't want to make excuses. Like I say, that the part of the UK Nationals that I regretted most, and I was inaccurate in the timing on a couple of my triggers, and I think those are game rule violations, and I regret being sloppy in those spots. But like, that's just a game rule violation. I'm sure all of us have committed those. The part I'm actually not okay with is making a take back, because that's not part of like how I'd like to play the game, especially at professional rel. like if we're just playing casual games or we're playing Flesh and Blood online, you can press the undo button as much as you want. Like if you like get to the end of your turn, like I and we're playing at Armory and you go, I don't know how, but I completely messed this up. I played all my cards in the wrong order. Can I do it right? You go ahead. That's fine. Like, but like, Flesh and Blood at an Armory and Flesh and Blood at the Pro Tour or at the late stages of a calling are different games. We're here for a different reason. And like you said, and this is something I said to James White when we had a chat after the Pro Tour, is that despite any of the gameplay, or the game's issues over the last year, maybe with some of the bans or some of the heroes or the decks we've seen, like what Flesh and Blood has done exceptionally, amazingly, and like for me, and I know for a lot of players like me, is they have nailed the tournament side and like bringing us amazing tournaments, and that's why I'm there. I'm there to play amazing tournaments, and that's what Flesh and Blood has done. At least for me, is better than actually any other company and any other game that I've played, and like is what drew me to the game in the first place. I'm sure a lot of us can remember reading that the Road to the Pro Tour article, I think it's called, or the 2022 organized play announcement.
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
And like being like, oh my god, they've just brought back, they've just taken all the things that Magic did so well. Am I okay to talk about Magic on this podcast?
Of course,
yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, they've taken all the things that Magic did so well, and then got rid of, and then said, hey, we know you really loved these things, and like, I was a player that like dreamed of playing the Pro Tour and spent 3 years of my life, and then eventually did qualify to play for the Pro Tour, like working really hard for that, and so for that to basically disappear, like killed my passion for playing that game. And then for Flesh and Blood to be like, we know there's this thing that you love and we're making it, and it's real, and it is the Pro Tour. Like I've played both, and it is like the Flesh and Blood Pro Tour is the Pro Tour, and it's magical, and like that's what's great about Flesh and Blood to me is playing great tournaments. And the game is almost secondary to that in a way, because it's just, for me, like I've played a bunch of different card games competitively. I've played Magic, I've played Legends of Runeterra, I've played Hearthstone, not really to a tournament level, but relatively competitively. I've played Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, but like the one thing that combines all of those is competition. And like what Flesh and Blood does better than any of those other games, is it has amazing competitions where you can test yourself, and it's not about the prizes. You can just to be playing for those stakes at a high level with intensity, with something on the line, is just such an exhilarating and like focusing and just like all encompassing feeling that like that's why I'm there,
So during your interview spot with Fabled Academy, you had mentioned that you were planning on taking a break after Pro Tour Lille, and then you won. Obviously, your plans may have changed. What were your plans before that you were going to win? How long of a break were you going to take, and what was in the future here?
Well, so I had been struggling quite a lot financially outside of the game. Just to be pretty clear and open, I don't work a normal job. I bet on sports full time for a living, and have done for the last like 5 years. But in the past year, I lost a lot of money in some investments and went on a pretty horrendous downswing, which left me in not great ideal financial spot. And it was becoming quite hard to justify spending so much of my time playing a card game, just from like a financial stability point of view, because I'm not the kind of person that can like very well juggle having multiple things in my life. I tend to think I've got about three. I've got my girlfriend, I can go to the gym, and I can play Flesh and Blood a lot, and that's actually about all I've got space in my life for. Like I really struggle with more than that. So like if I have to get a job, like I'm gonna struggle to do more. Like I struggle with my ADHD to a point where like I really can't do much with my life. So I have to just focus in on a few things and give my everything to those tasks and just hyper focus on those things. And so like if I'm picking up other responsibilities or other things, it becomes really difficult to, you know, maintain a hobby to the degree that I want to, you know. And so like it was becoming hard to justify playing it. I actually had to borrow some money from some family to play the Pro Tour. That's actually how bad it was. So like it doesn't just mean like it was amazing. It makes a massive impact on my financial and like life and my ability to pay my rent to have done well at that tournament, which is like is kind of crazy. It's changed my situation so much. I wasn't like quitting the game, but you know I was like selling a large amount of my collection like just to pay for stuff. I was I sold my other PTI. I had a PTI. I've earned 2 PTIs and qualified for both Pro Tours. I gave one of my PTIs to my friend Pete, who came second at the Calling Utrecht. He's one of my best friends in the world, and getting to play Pro Tour 1 with him was so awesome. And then I sold my second PTI, mostly to be able to afford to go to the second Pro Tour. But I didn't have any other PTIs left, and I wasn't necessarily qualified for Worlds. So I kind of said, I'll be going to the Pro Tour, I'll be going to Nationals. If I don't qualify for Worlds, you know, I don't know. I guess I'll play the next Pro Tour qualifier season, but then in Nationals, and we'll see, you know. But now my situation is very different because I have an extra PTI. I'm qualified for Worlds like 3 times over in like 3 different ways at this point, I guess. And I can afford to go to those tournaments. So now I really have to evaluate, well, what do I want out of the game? Because my situation is different. And I'm definitely going to Worlds. That part's locked up, that's for sure now. I've got to win it now. Got to win it. But I think I still need to find a way to try and build some stability in my life and make sure I can approach the game from a sustainable way, because I tend to either like flip between hyper focusing on things or completely not, and the hyper focusing side of that tends to come with like a healthy degree or an unhealthy degree of burnout. And so
I feel that.
Oh, I feel that so hard.
Yeah,
man.
Like, you like, and like it'll get to the point. It got to the point, at least in Magic, and I really want to avoid this, where like I would travel to GPs and like we'd get to the Sunday and like everyone would be there having a great time, like enjoying their weekend, and because like they're on a weekend away from like their life and their responsibility. It's a holiday, right? Whereas like I was just pursuing Magic to such an intense degree that like I would just be like, after the Magic was done, I'd just be gone, and I just zoned out, just wanting to be basically anywhere else in the world, just wanted to hibernate, like, and that's not who I am. I'm a pretty sociable person. I get a lot of energy from being around other people, and so when I was that burnt out that like once the Magic was done, I just wanted to be away from the event. I knew that like I burnt myself out so bad, and I want to avoid that, because that took away a lot of the love and enjoyment that I felt for Magic, and I don't want that to happen for Flesh and Blood. So I'm trying to be kind of reasonable in how I approach the game, because I know I can be obsessive past the point that is reasonable.
No, that's totally fair. It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm in the same boat as you. I struggle with ADHD, and like hyper focusing and burning out, or like I go back and forth between the two as well. So I can totally relate to where you're coming from. It's a struggle for sure. Moving forward a little bit, you had the UK Nationals title. Going into this Pro Tour, like, did defending the UK Nats title mean something to you? Did you feel like you had something to prove going into this this Pro Tour, or was it just kind of more on the lines of let's just see what happens?
Like, I've vehemently defended the claim that I am the best player in the UK ever since I won UK Nationals, and I'm really great friends with a lot of the UK community. I didn't know many of the UK community when UK Nats rolled around. I actually had only been playing Flesh and Blood for like a month and a half at that point, or a little bit more than that, like 7 or 8 weeks. And so, like, the UK Nationals was actually my first time interacting with both a lot of the UK community and then the Flesh and Blood community at large, and it wasn't the greatest first impression for either sides, honestly. But through a year of traveling to basically every pro quest in every part of the country, playing all the major events, traveling with a bunch of people, I've made tons and tons of friends. So I always want to show that I am the UK national champion. In any tournament I go to, I'm both like, and one of my friends, Matt, at some point not long after I won nationals, like, told me something that hadn't really occurred to me, like. Which was something that really changed my perspective, was that, like, actually as the UK national champion, like, that actually means something, like, and that I actually represent the UK in a way, and that, like, the way that I act and the way that I play will have an impact on how other people do as well, because, like, by definition, like, I am someone that people will look up to and, like, will emulate in some way, and so I should try to do well and also be a good opponent, because that will have an impact in the community. And if you're a good role model to people in your community, you will have a better community to play with. And so thankfully now I have a good UK community, like, with loads and loads of really great players that since that nationals has actually leveled up so much. But I still want to prove that I am the best player, and I do believe that is true. But now I think there's a lot of competition. Whereas last year, I think the level, like, the game was still just growing, and there hadn't been a lot of competitive players from other games, because most of the players in this game did come from other games. For some people, this is their first card game. But for a lot of players, it's competitive players from other games who are like, oh my God, there's this wonderful game with wonderful competitions. But I still got to prove that I'm the best. And so I did put a lot of pressure on myself to do well, but also want to see my friends and other people from the UK community do well, and, like, we did. It was crazy when I came to sit down to draft at the start of day 2. Like, I was looking around, and just, like, every pod had a UK player in it. Like, from, like, where I was sat in, I think, pod 7, 5 and 2, just, like, every single one after, it was like 1 in 6, 1 in 5, and just all the way to the, like, even to pod 1, where I think we had 2 players in pod 1, and I was like, oh my God. It was like, and, like, all of those players were players that, like, were just playing or just starting when I won nationals, and, like, since then we've seen them come up, like, so much, and that's so awesome. But I still got to prove that I'm better than them, That's the goal. That's the main point here. So yeah, it does play in my mind, like, proving that I am the best player in the UK. I got a lot of competition with a lot of my friends, and, like, there was a couple of people, like Jamie Faulkner is a really strong UK player. He top 8'd Utrecht with Dromai, and he top 8'd the Battle this weekend. And he's a really strong player. And, like, some people have been saying, no, I think Jamie might be the best player in the UK. And I'm like, no, trust me, guys, it's me. It is me. But
only one guy's got a title for it.
Yeah, but actually, he made a pretty good case by topping the Battle Hardened, because it meant that I'm not actually the most recent player to top 8 a major event, because the Battle Hardened ended later. So he technically I'm washed. Technically, I'm just a has-been, and he's the most recent person with an event.
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah, exactly. It's been at least 2 days since I did anything relevant, so he's got me on that front. But it is, like, it's something that played on my mind that, like, I do want to represent the UK well. Like, I do represent the UK just in the same way that Tarek represents the US, and, has done a great job, I think. And so
Tarek's technically in Canada now. He just moved back.
that is true. That is true. Yeah, that is true. I found that out today. I asked Yuanji, like, do you know if Tarek is playing your nationals or Canada's? And he's playing Canada's, right? He's not defending his title. That's really interesting.
He's got to establish himself as possibly the best Canadian player now. But I mean, Yuki gives him a pretty good run for his name.
Murderer's Row.
Well, I mean, between Dante, Yuki, really Isaac Kroot, there's some.
Joel Reptor's really good.
Yeah, I played Joel in the Pro Tour as well, and he put up a hell of a fight.
I played Joel in the late stages on Dash.
Yeah.
And we played. I think it was a 1-0. Like, just killed him with my last arcane. Like, with my last rune chant pushed me over the line on my last turn. Like, couldn't be a closer game kind of one.
Yeah, no, Joel puts up a hell of a fight, and even I do feel Canada is a country that, on the whole, we have a lot to prove still, because like there's so many good people that just haven't had a chance to shine yet.
What country has the best player?
Oh, that's
again.
Which country has the best player right now?
So like I was trying to talk about this conversation. I was thinking about this on the drive home, because I drove home. I personally drove home 6 hours after I won the event, which was a bit of a wild one. I was a bit shaky. So it might not have been the wisest idea, but I did make the drive home, and we just about made it, so it was all right. But I was thinking, like, do I get to call myself the best Flesh and Blood player in the world at this point?
You have an argument now.
Like, I'm certainly in the conversation.
I think you're technically the most decorated now. Does anyone else have a Nats and a Pro Tour?
I was like, I think Jacob Pearson might have 3 callings. We were discussing this because we were trying to work out if I had the most living legend points, if I was closest to being rotated out of the format.
Yep.
And we think Jacob Pearson might have 3 callings, so he might have 300 living legend points. But he doesn't work. He doesn't play. He works for LSS now, so
he doesn't count anymore.
Yeah, that's but like, and then I was like, wait, Pablo top 8 the second Pro Tour after winning the first. I was like, he's making a pretty good case. And then also, I don't think that I am the best Flesh and Blood player in the world. I think that when I talk to a lot of people about the game, like, you can usually, like, when they give you information about the game, usually if I can pass and understand everything they say, and then some of the things they say I think don't make sense for very clear reasons, that gives you some information. But like, when I talk to Michael Hamilton, he says things about the game, and I don't necessarily understand them, but I also know that he's right. And I'm like, he's probably on a level a little bit beyond me, at least in some areas of the game. I would say that I think Michael probably is the most skilled player that I've played against.
That's fair. He's a monster. He sees the game
really clearly. And like, despite having a reputation as like maybe as like a Oldhim or like a Oldhim player, he's actually incredibly flexible, and is also very hardworking, while being very, very sharp and very, very skilled. I remember in preparation for GP Madrid, he sits down with our Oldhim player, who is also quite a new player as well. But Michael goes, sorry if I mess anything up. This is the first time I've played the Oldhim mirror in Blitz. And so we're just playing out this long, drawn-out, grindy mirror. And at some point he goes, oh, you've just drawn the pulse, right? And I'm like, he said this is the first time he's played the matchup. He's not only tracking his deck, he's also tracking his opponent's.
Crazy.
And then, like, so he obviously handily smashes my teammate. And my teammate's feels a bit down on himself because it wasn't even particularly close. And the Oldhim mirror is very grindy, so to have a big gap means there was a big gap in. That means one player played a lot better than the other. Not to discredit my teammate, but he was feeling really down on himself. Like, man, I played this Oldhim mirror, I just got smashed. And I was like, what you need to understand is that when Michael Hamilton says, oh, I don't really know this matchup, what he probably means is he's the best Oldhim player in the world. When he says he doesn't know the matchup, he literally couldn't be more wrong. There might be no one more equipped to play Oldhim mirrors than Michael Hamilton. And so, like, of the players I've been exposed to, and I tested with Michael for the first Pro Tour, I think Michael is better than me. I don't know about Pablo. I played Pablo at the Pro Tour. I played a pretty close game. I survived on one and just about finished him off.
Mhm.
But I played Pablo in the Calling Madrid. We played a pretty close game in which we went to time and we conceded because
Mhm.
it didn't make sense for us both to get eliminated. We were in the X3 bracket, so it was one of us go home, and we were behind in a game that went to time, and so we just decided, you go ahead, good luck, and they ended up taking the whole tournament down, which was a bit of a mad one.
Yep.
So he's clearly an exceptional player. I don't have enough experience to him to know just how good he is, but I do know that our Oldham player said when he played against Kano, when he played against Pablo on Kano, it just felt like he was dead, and his opponent knew how he was going to die a good 20 turns before it happened.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty ominous thing to say, So
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't necessarily think I am the best flesh and blood player in the world, but I think those two people are probably particularly sick. I think there's also a lot of other good considerations, like maybe Hayden Dale is a really sharp player.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that I at least look at the game differently than a lot of people. That part I'm willing to give myself,
No, that's totally.
I think at least
that's totally fair. You mentioned Flesh and Blood Online, or Fabo, as it's starting to be called. Really,
not sure I like Fabo. Not sure I like Fabo.
No,
Flesh and Blood Online,
doesn't roll off the tongue the way you want
not
it to.
quite there, no.
Is that totally fair? But you mentioned it really helped with your testing. Tell us a bit more about your prep for the Pro Tour. Like, did you have a rigid structure at this point, or did you take it more organically? Like, what worked for you to get ready?
Yeah, so for PT1, I had actually a very rigid structure. I tested with the Arsenal Pass guys, Michael Hamilton, Roger Bodie, and Sasha Markovic as my team. And I ended up not having a great experience. Probably, yeah, I mean, it's probably not the most PC thing, so I feel free to edit this out. But I spent about 3 months working with those guys. We played from about 1 in the morning until 4 in the morning my time, and I stayed up every night doing that. And me and Michael were set to working on a chain deck and putting all of our time into that. And you might remember that Sasha, Brendan, and Hayden all played Kano at the Pro Tour. Me and Michael didn't actually find out about that until the morning of the Pro Tour.
Oh.
Oh man. Oh, all right. Yeah.
So it's kind of been something I've sat on for a while, and I don't really mean to cause drama, but someone will ask. Like it was a situation which, like, at the time I didn't realize how upsetting that was, but then after the tournament, I when I came back home and really thought about what actually that meant in terms of like what they'd done. It meant that, like, basically they'd taken mine and Michael's time and effort, and we built a really good chain list. Like, our deck list was only like 3 or 4 cards off the Pro Tour winning list. We'd really and the list that ended up staying stock for the rest of the Pro Tour, like the PTQ season afterwards. And so, like, it felt really bad to, like, put a ton of time on a horrific time schedule. Like, I really tested it hard for that tournament, and I think we did a lot of great work. And so to come away from that tournament, like, feeling like I basically just got used for my time was really, really rough. So when it came to this Pro Tour, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be pretty open with all my testing. Like, I don't want to take it, like, I don't want to have that, like, rigid, like, structure where, like, everyone's really secretive. Everyone's, like, hiding things away. Like, we're all keeping everything back. Like, we're in some secret team. Like, I was just like, you know what? I'll play games with anyone pretty much. Like, I'm gonna focus on doing what I'm doing. I'm gonna, like, think about my ideas. I'm gonna play with my friends, and I'm gonna work as much or as little as I want, and I'm gonna do what feels right. And The Briar deck, I originally I started like looking into Belittle Briar basically as soon as they banned Chain. Like I remember the words like they said, I was like, right, well they banned one Rune Blade, on to the next. And I put my 6 Belittles into the deck and I started building. And then we saw, I can't remember the name of the player, but the Realm Games 10K was won by a Belittle Briar deck. And I was like,
Nasib. Oh man, can't remember his name. But yeah, that was a mess.
That was a bit of a breakout, bit of a breakout deck. And I remember being like, damn, I literally have already built this deck. Now everyone has it. I was like, these guys are smart too. And then I played in like one Road to Nationals. I ended up going like 3-1 and a draw, which I actually just conceded because again, I was potentially a little behind. And I just decided it's best that, I in general, I try to avoid draws. I think they just feel bad. I'd rather the game ends in some conclusive manner for someone. So I just conceded it there. So I went 3-1 in like one event and then basically put the deck down because I was taking a bit of time away, just trying to chill off the game a bit and didn't have a lot of time and time to play really. And then about 3 weeks ago, picked up Flesh and Blood Online and like loaded back up my Briar deck and started playing a few games. And I was like, the more I played, the more like the deck sort of changed and got closer and closer. And being able to play on Flesh and Blood Online at basically any time that suited me was really awesome for my structure because I'm not a particularly organized or together person. That might already be clear to anyone that's ever watched me play Flesh and Blood, had a conversation with me, just seen what I look like. I'm not, clean cut and, and crisp in all situations. I am just winging it by the seat of my pants at basically all times. And so, just being able to sit down and play Flesh and Blood at any time was completely revolutionary for me. Because before, if you wanted to play Flesh and Blood, you have to find an opponent, load up Tabletop Simulator, get your deck list. You have to be on Discord with them basically, or it's really, really difficult to actually play a quick game. And it's just not particularly engaging or satisfying. I don't know. It doesn't have the same enjoyment. It's nowhere close to playing a paper game of Flesh and Blood, but it's also quite cumbersome and difficult. Whereas Flesh and Blood Online removes a lot of the difficulty and makes it actually quicker and more, I think, more satisfying to play on there because it does feel a lot more like playing a game of Flesh and Blood. And so it changed everything for me. I literally remember saying I hadn't played a single game of Flesh and Blood in a month. And then when I first played a single game of Flesh and Blood Online, I probably played 10 games a day from then until when the Pro Tour started. I have literally those guys to thank for my Pro Tour win. 0% chance I win the PT otherwise, I think. I would probably have not played much Flesh and Blood at all. Registered one of my teammates' Phi decks. Had very little practice on it, not done very well. And, now you would be interviewing someone else. Probably Bartosz, Mateus,
To be fair, you were on my list before you won.
Okay. You know what? And I'll even say the moment you top 8'd, I thought to myself, I bet you Matt Foulkes wins.
I think I had the best deck in the top 8. I think
you certainly did.
I think I had the most interesting deck in the top 8. And I do think I don't think my deck is massively better than every other Briar version. It's just, I think, a little bit more powerful, a little bit more consistent. And I think that, it is a better version of the Briar deck is what I think.
So then to expand on the Flesh and Blood Online a bit, do you feel like you're getting the quality of games you need to get out of Flesh and Blood Online to get the in-depth practice you need?
Yeah. In any environment where you're playing against, a random opponent from the internet, it's never going to be perfect, right? But you can still get that experience where you're like, I would like to play a test game with, a specific person, and you can get them in and play, right? But you also just have the option of providing an opponent to you. And I've run into multiple of my already friends like playing Flesh and Blood Online, and like I didn't my name on Flesh and Blood Online isn't my name. So like when I'm on there, I was just it's not a big secret. Like my name is just something. It's a stupid name. It's Big Dog Diggers. It's just I don't know, 3 stupid words. It just sounds fun to say. But like
I think I've played you.
Yeah, I played on there quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I remember in the lead up to the Pro Tour, I played quite a lot of people who I already know, who I already had been practiced with in the past on tabletop on simulator. So like you're still getting like a lot of Pro Tour players. Like I played quite a number of games with players like Tower Number 9, with Matt W, as you said, maybe yourself, Max Thomas, just like a bunch of like strong Pro Tour quality players, just in random pickup games are just queued into them. And I'm sure there's other good players whose name I'm not familiar with or weren't playing on an account like that had their name, and like my win rate on Flesh and Blood Online isn't that good. Like, and that's telling, right? That says that the level is high. If I can't win that at that high of a rate on there, it means that the opponents are really good, and that's great. That's great. It means, you're able to get good practice, and it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes someone loads up Armorless Azalea, and you might have to do a little disconnect because I'll just make sure that like I'm like setting expectations when I put up a game. I say I'm practicing for the Pro Tour, and hopefully the person that joins is either looking for serious practice or is also practicing for the Pro Tour, and then you can have the same expectations. You can have a good fun experience together. But I honestly can't recommend the website enough. It's absolutely insane how much it transformed my enjoyment of Flesh and Blood, because it allowed me to play the game in a way that worked for me quickly, easily, and efficiently. And it doesn't replace Flesh and Blood Online. Like doesn't replace like Flesh and Blood in real life. It's not. It's not the same experience by a long shot, but what it does is it makes the preparation process much easier. And like for any newer or like people just sort of on-ramping into competitive play, like just get on there, load up a deck, jump into some games and play, And also one thing is don't feel bad about undoing. Like it's really easy to misclick on the client when you're learning. Like if you do it, just undo, go back, like don't like change your line. Like as long as you're not doing anything in bad faith, like just undo, do it right. Like we're all on there for practice. We're all on there to learn. I'm like no one's on there. At least I hope not. Being like, I have a 79% win rate on Flesh and Blood Online. No one's on there rule shocking their opponents for a miss trigger.
There's
on Flesh and Blood Online.
There's a surprising number.
I've not seen it. I've not seen it. Okay, and I feel like but it's just a great environment. So if you are looking to improve, like that's actually just one of the best places you can be doing it. Can't shout out those guys enough. Like genuinely, like I thought about maybe I could like reach out to them for like some kind of sponsorship or nothing, but then I realized actually like they shouldn't be sponsoring me. I should be sponsoring them. And so I'm going to subscribe to their Patreon as soon as I get off this podcast, actually, because like I just owe those guys a debt of a lot because they really helped me for the Pro Tour.
Well, and even like Pat and I are in the same boat as you. Like, and even for myself, I spent a ton of time in the 2 weeks leading up to Pro Tour, just jamming as many games as I could. And it was really nice to meet the guys behind Flesh and Blood Online in Lille. Super nice guys. They're super passionate about what they do. Actually, Pat and I are chatting with them right now. I think our next week's episode is going to be us interviewing them.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, they're
hashtag shameless plug.
Yeah, they're doing phenomenal work. It really reminds me of like when I'm actually fairly new to TCGs in the grand scheme of things, and I came into Magic after Arena already existed. And I loved that, like the ease of access of just being able to pick up a game anytime you wanted. And Flesh and Blood Online is giving us that for Flesh and Blood. And it's really cool to see that you found the success that you found out of it. And to your point, I can't stress enough like how good of a platform it is. Like Pat and I are definitely going to be pumping it a lot on the show here moving forward, because it's just such a phenomenal platform.
While I'm here and while I have you guys, I'm going to use the platform to get my question in early for next week.
Go right ahead. What do you got? We'll save it. We'll put you right to the top of the list.
It's an interesting point, actually. And my one worry about Flesh and Blood Online, my one reservation about it, and that is actually the very, very high amount of data it can generate. And while I think a lot of people think that data is actually a good thing, I actually worry about what like substantial win rate data can do to metagames, because we aren't actually exposed to that level of data almost ever in Flesh and Blood. And that's actually one of the good things about the game, I think, is that you don't have statistical evidence of what is winning and what is not. And if Flesh and Blood Online generates such a large number of games that it can provide a pretty accurate sample about that, I worry that potentially that could lead to like diverging metagames, because if everyone can see that Briar wins 58% of its games and Viserai wins 48, everyone will just show up on Briar, and that also can have the knock-on effect of people, instead of just being like, oh, Briar seems good, Viserai doesn't seem that good, what can I do to change this, what could I do, like they're just going to say, oh well, there's the high number, I'll pick the high number, and it sort of stymies creativity and the opportunities for innovation, because and it removes some of the skill and interesting part of the game, which is deck selection, and not all of it. The numbers aren't everything. Numbers of how much a deck wins on Flesh and Blood Online isn't everything, or even a lot of much to how good a deck is, but I worry that it can have like converging effects on a metagame that actually take away from the game in some way. And so I guess I would ask what their plans are when it comes to the managing of win rate data, and if they think that could have an impact on the game further down the line.
Phenomenal question. It's a
lot. Sorry, that was a lot. That was a lot of
Let me
words.
just get that again.
The beauty of recording all this is
the short form is
we got it. No, you're on the top of the list. Question will be asked.
Yeah. Do they think that do they worry that the large number of win rate data that their program produces could have a negative impact on the game further down the line? That would be the short form of the question.
Cool.
But like that's not to take away from the utility of the program, which I think far outweighs any potential negative consequences. Just that is my only concern, and it's a thing that Wizards of the Coast tried to manage by slowly reducing the amount of data points that were given to the community, because they did see those kind of effects happening.
Well, and I'm sure that's even part of James White's reasoning for not wanting an online client and not wanting to do an official one, is the meta doesn't get solved as quickly, and
that's good. That's really good.
It's a positive thing, definitely.
So you make a really valid point, and it really probably needs to come down to a balance of, we need accessibility and people need to be able to play the game however, whenever they so choose, but then also not giving the ability for just the meta to become solved outright right off the get-go.
Exactly. Like, as competitive players, we want all the data we can get, right? Like the competitive spike inside of us says, oh, let me find out what's the best, let me see all of the available information. But like sometimes, what you want is not what you need, and I think this is a pretty good example of that.
For sure.
That's the only thing that worries me, is that like as you said, that's probably not part of James White's or probably part of James White's vision or vision for Flesh and Blood is that by playing the Flesh and Blood, it slows down like that rapid solving of the game that like leads into kind of a stale metagame. And by that would be a potential trouble for Flesh and Blood Online down the line, where they this problem is affecting them, and then I wouldn't want to see that Flesh and Blood Flesh and Blood Online have troubles because of this data, or whatever. Like that's something
right.
Because that could pose a threat in some way to LSS, and so
certainly
that's just a thing that I kept thinking about when I thought about Flesh and Blood Online, because I was like, because Kagane Gaming, if I'm allowed to shout him out.
Of course, yeah. Friend of the pod. We love Kugani.
Okay, awesome. He did a couple of videos utilizing and showing the data from Flesh and Blood Online, and that CC video, first CC he did it was a couple of weeks ago now, and that was before people were saying that Briar was the best deck, like a good week and a half before, and Briar was already winning a ton of games then. It was basically the highest win rate deck at that point, and it was winning a ton of games then. And we saw that data come to fruition. Granted, it's not all perfect. It also said Bravo was winning a lot of games, and we didn't see a lot of Bravo conversion over the last couple of weeks. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good deck. That data does mean something, And the more players we see on Flesh and Blood Online, and we actually saw their servers go down today.
Yes, Pat and I were just talking about that.
You're trying to get a game in just before you came in, and it just wasn't happening. We went on the server.
Yeah, exactly.
They're down.
That's the level of blow up they've seen over the last, even just the last month. I think their website's completely blown up in terms of user base, and that's awesome. That's really awesome, because what it also means is that there's loads and loads of people that want to play Flesh and Blood.
Yes. Yep.
And that's really cool.
It's only can be good at that point, right?
Well, and I think as we see more accessibility to just easy online pickup games, we're going to see the community grow exponentially now, because people can access the game in a way that they couldn't before.
Yeah, but we're also going to see people get a lot better, a lot quicker.
That's true.
Scary.
It is.
People
is very scary.
Are already getting really good really quick, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's the jump between when I played UK Nationals now last year, it's pretty hard to say this without sounding arrogant, but I think that at UK Nationals last year, I was the best player in the field by a large margin. I think that's a safe thing. I think I can comfortably say that.
Yeah.
But when I sit down to play this year, I still believe I am the best player in the field, but I think there's some really, really strong players who certainly could beat me on any given day. Just to name a few, we have Pete Ward, Jamie Faulkner, Matt Lai, all of who have top callings, Hamish, Chisholm Brown, who top 8 nationals last year, Aaron Boyan. There's just so many strong players in the UK now that. We have Shamir, who just top 4 the Pro Tour. He's a player who isn't really from my part of the country, but has just been putting in infinite volume over the last 6 to 9 months. He's just always up there in XP. He just plays 3 armories a week, which is not really how.
Yes, he does.
But that man plays so much that he's kind of quietly risen. He didn't play the first Pro Tour. He wasn't qualified for the first Pro Tour. But he managed just to slip in and get a win on the first week of the ProQuest season, get qualified for this one, and then it's just been putting in hours and hours and hours of time. And he's another player who's just he's mostly judging in the first ProQuest season. He judged a number of ProQuests I played in the first season, and then the next ProQuest season he's in the semi-finals, sat across from me. Yep. So that's just another example of how much the UK community, and I'm sure the global community, has just massively improved over the last year. And so that will only accelerate with Flesh and Blood Online.
And
we're in sorry.
I was just
gonna say Shamir in particular has been on you talked about him grinding in the armories. He's been on the Fighters Guild Monday nights. Max Thomas hosts that.
I played the armory a lot of times to qualify for the Pro Tour.
He's taken it down recently in the last month or so. He's taken it down 2 times already, which it's tough to do it once. And he's just been on. It's not an easy
tournament to win. I don't think I've actually. I'm not sure I've actually won it, and I've played it quite a number of times.
I think it's my one claim to fame. I think Adam, I've taken down a Fighters Guild once.
And that's saying something.
I haven't had a chance to play one since I qualified for the Pro Tour, because I had this 3-week stint where I lost the finals of basically I lost the finals of a ProQuest to my best friend.
Yep.
And then I was like, oh God, I don't think that there's any more that I can really play without driving like 5 hours.
Yep. Yep.
Like I'm pretty close on XP. I probably have to play like 40 armories. Not 40, but like I probably have to play like 20 armories in the next like 3 weeks to qualify for the Pro Tour. And so then proceeded to play like 3 armories a day for like 3 weeks. And it was like, God, by the time I was like, I think I'm pretty good at taking losses well.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost a lot of high stakes games of card tournaments in my life, you know? Like I lost the finals of the Battle Hardened to Francesco Giorgio, who is another player who I didn't shout out, who's actually also probably one of the top like 3 or 4 players. I think he made an X4 this weekend at the Pro Tour, falling just 1 win short of the top 8. So, you know, shout out to him, another great player. And but I lost the finals of a Battle Hardened, which is, you know, it's still a PTI, it's still a great result, but like you lose the gold foil, you lose the last match of the tournament, you know. You want to win that one so badly. And like my process, I always have the same process, which is like if I lose a big match, because, you know, if you care, it hurts to lose.
Yes,
of course.
And you know, if you're really caring, you're really invested, it hurts. And so I tried to go through the same process to make sure that I can like understand and like rationally process a game, and then like move on from how like frustrated or upset or disappointed you feel. And that will be like the first thing is when I lose, like I'll shake your opponent's hand, you know, say, you know, good game, well done. And then I'll just try and sit down, like look through my graveyard, think about the turns and the decisions, and like, well, what about this? And like try and commit the game to memory, you know, try and think, right, what were the interesting turns and like what did I do wrong? Like, is there any points where this went wrong? Like try and rationally understand the game. And then when I've sort of rationally processed the game, then I think about it like, oh, this sucks, you know. But once you've really thought about the actual like the logical parts of the game, it feels much more easy just to deal with the emotions, and then you can just sort of set that aside and say, okay, we move on. But the follow-on from that is that despite dealing with loss as well, there is nothing worse than losing a game in an armory when your opponent is just playing a fun Friday night armory and you're desperately trying to grind EXP for the Pro Tour, and it's like, yep, you know, you're having a fun game here, and I'm playing like a pseudo ProQuest final, you know. It's like we couldn't be playing more different games, you know. Mm-hmm. And like, congratulations, enjoy the win, but oh my God, I'm so frustrated. I need these XP points so badly.
I feel that so hard right now, trying to get into Worlds.
Exactly. It's like I've drawn a few games in online armories before, and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst result I've ever taken. You know, and it's like I've taken losses for like a few $1,000s and been fine, like still been pretty chill, been pretty happy, no worries. But like a couple of those armory losses, and you're like, oh my God, please, just I need the wins. I need the wins.
That's too funny.
Yeah, like, honestly, I remember like grinding EXP for the Pro Tour and just it was testing on my mental. It was really testing on my mental.
All right, so this next question actually kind of phases in well. We were talking about data and analytics and such. You used Belittle in your Briar deck, and that seemed to stem from a very numbers-based analytic approach to the game. We've seen this approach a few times with card choices in Blitz featuring Kasai and at times Viserai. Can you speak a bit more on this approach and how you would make decisions on a certain cards, and tell me why I shouldn't play Sift?
Sure. Okay. Those are two separate but also both very important questions. So the first one is, I don't know if I necessarily take like an analytical and numbers like based approach to the game. One thing I do in deck building is I think I probably goldfish a lot more than I play against other people. Like I think it's actually kind of a weird part of Flesh and Blood is you can actually do a lot of the work just yourself. Like you don't necessarily need an opponent, and sometimes all an opponent will actually do is just obfuscate the truth of the situation. Like you'll distract yourself with your opponent than actually focusing on what your deck's doing, which is, you know, in most decks, at least most proactive or aggressive decks, like by far the most important part is understanding how do you make your linear plan better. And so it's not necessarily always numerical or analytical as opposed to just, just through sheer repetition, I'll be like, oh, actually, this doesn't work. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't play right. So, for the example of Belittled Briar, I'd played a lot of the original Belittled Briar list, like similar to the one that won the Rams 10K, that was playing Explosive Growth and Vexing Malice Red.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like upon playing them again and again and again, I was like, why don't these cards feel good? It's like a 1 for 5, That should be pretty great especially when you're playing it with Belittle, right? That should be really good. But like, why do they feel so bad? Why do they always feel so disappointing? And like I was like, because like the most broken parts of this deck are Belittle and Creepers. And what the 1 for 5s do, or what Explosive Growth is kind of a 1 for 5 if it's fused basically. But what the one cost attacks do is they don't work in a Belittle, get Minnowism, Creepers, Minnowism attack weapon like combo. It just doesn't fit into that play pattern, and that's the play pattern your deck just thrives off of. And I was like, okay, how can we play into that play pattern? And then the extension from that is like, first we found Promise of Plenty, and we were like, oh, this card actually feels like surprisingly good because it works fluidly with that like linear strategy of being able to use a blue, a Belittle, and a 3-power attack to deal 13 or 14 damage and present an on-hit often. And then we had Promise of Plenty, and then we were like, hold on. We were about to put Yellow Snatch in our Pro Tour deck. And then we put it in, and we were like, wait, this card's just great. Because like Yellow Snatch looks a hell of a lot worse than Red Snatch. And it is. It really is. But for the specific purposes of our deck, it's perfect. It feels exactly what we need it to. And it lines up perfectly with our play pattern. And it wasn't until we removed the 1 cost attacks that the deck actually started to work fluidly and cleanly. And we sort of got there just through repetition and just playing a lot of games and trying to understand what feels right and what feels correct. And I think it's often difficult to actually take actually a really analytical approach to the game. You have to just trust how you feel a lot of the time, and then try and hone that feeling or intuition is just via years of play and I don't know, just believing in yourself and just actually trusting your instincts, and then when they're wrong, try and work out why, and then hopefully at the end of it you have a set of instincts which feel kind of correct a lot of the time. So I don't know if it's necessarily analytical as more just sheer brute force and intuition more so. And then probably the more important question is why you shouldn't play Sift. I've been pretty vocal about not playing Sift. I didn't play any Sift in the Pro Tour. A lot of people did. I don't think it's an egregious card. I just think people think that card is great, and I don't understand why, because it's just not very good. When you play it, it's sort of like discarding a card. The way I look at it is Sift is sort of like a Tome of the Arknight if you always missed.
Okay. No, that's a good way to look at it.
All right.
You're just down a card every time.
Yeah.
Sure, on the Tome of the Arknight, you're also down 1 mana, but you're pretty much all of the way there without ever. I mean, you can have a small upgrade in hand, but you're always down a card. It can never be that good.
Yeah.
And so, the major use of Sift is a blue.
Yeah.
It's also sometimes a block 4. At least I thought that there would be a slightly higher ninja representation at the Pro Tour than there was. There was a bit of a representation, but not the massive representation we saw in Utrecht. which is why I included 3 this rounds on me, because into Ninja, it's basically great at any stage of the game. And then into Viserai and Briar, it's also quite good on the first turn of the game if you're going first. You just draw a card, and then you start to present some damage to generate an embodiment and threaten damage. And your opponent either has the choice to take the damage or, give you back the 5th card that you gave them, which means that now their attacks are -1 for the start of the rest of the turn, and you didn't give them anything for it because they used their card to block. Mm-hmm. So, and then the alternative is they just take the damage, which is what happened in my first match of CC in the Pro Tour. My opponent, I played it this round on me, and my opponent particularly liked their hand. So I went Bramble Spark Fused, Overload for 7, no blocks, Weapon Attack for 4, no blocks. So my opponent started with a 5-card hand, but I had dealt them 11 damage on the first turn.
Yep.
And, I think they said at the end of the game, they were like, I really should have blocked on that first turn, shouldn't I? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I think that was probably where it went wrong.
Someone got greedy.
But, yeah, regardless, you remove 1, 2, or 3 life from your opponent's attacks usually. Sometimes against Ninja, it's often, 5, 6, or 7 power, which is an absolutely insane first turn to basically gain 5, 6, or 7 life and remove the validity of any of your opponent's on-hit triggers, which is what that does to Fives because their attacks become so easily blockable. Like, you just completely ruin 5 if you draw that card in the first turn of the game. It's like you get to go first and second when you do it to them. And that's a bigger upside to me than playing a Sift. Like, just having a card that either if you draw it the first turn is great against basically anyone, or if you draw it basically any time against a Ninja is great. Like, is a big enough upside that I think it's better than just putting sort of a blue Sift in your deck. And then if you desperately need to have playable blues, you should already be playing Tome of the Arcanite, because that card's just very good. Tome of the Arcanite, I think, is like I think of it like a blue that plays like a yellow, because on average, if your deck is 50-50, you are coin flipping between drawing 2 or drawing 0. So on average, you draw 1.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much how the math works out on that one.
Yep.
Paying 1 mana to draw 1, it basically like a yellow, because if it costs 0 mana, it would be Gorganian Tone, basically, right? It would be similar to Gorganian Tone.
Sure.
And that's actually a 0 pitch card, but like it plays a lot more like a yellow. That's like a pretty powerful effect for a blue. And so I just think that card's worthy of an inclusion if you have a deck that's anywhere near close to 50-50 in ratios, and just like so much better than Sift. And I feel like I got massively rewarded again and again throughout the Pro Tour. I took 1 turn, and it was honestly one of the craziest things I've ever seen playing a game of Flesh and Blood, where in my winning in for the top 8, I took a turn in which I went Tome of the Arcanite, flip the top 2, put them both into my hand. Tome of the Arcanite, hit the top 2, put them both into my hand. Pay 3, Tome of Harvest, draw 3 cards. Now we've seen 7 new cards. Guess what? Here's another Tome of the Arcanite. Flip the top 2, both into my hand. Now we've seen 9 new cards. Sonata X equals 4. Add 3 cards to my hand is 12. Then I played a Belittle. 13, Belittle, 14, Belittle, 15 new cards into my hand in 1 turn.
I was around in the area when this play happened, and everyone was talking about how many cards you saw in your hand. Like, the whole room was talking about it.
When I hit the 3rd Tome of the Arcanite, I heard audible groans from around me. Just, oh my God. It was like a crime had been committed in the hall, Someone had been murdered, and it was my opponent.
You talk about signs from the TCG gods on the day.
Absolutely.
That's definitely one of them.
It takes a lot of luck to win a tournament, and although I probably didn't need the 3rd Tome of the Arcanite, it really sent the message home, like, that's a card that does something as a blue. Sift, not so much. Imagine I played 3 Sifts in a turn. Not quite the same result. You end up with an empty hand and a lot of damage. So I think there's just better options for blue. And, while I'm quite zealous in my discussion, it's not the worst blue. It's still a blue block 3, and that's a powerful effect. But I think, like, if that's what you're desperate for, this round's on me probably better, especially into like metas with a good amount of ninjas. Maybe we'll see 5 fall away now. Maybe we won't. We'll see. It's a new meta. We'll have to wait and see. But you know, I'm not massive on Stift as a card.
Fair enough. I will have to retire the Sifts.
I mean, when you put it like that, yeah, Sift is no good.
Yeah, when you use logic and reasoning. All right. So, we are going to talk a little bit about. We got some community questions. We're going to talk a little bit about Constructed here. So you obviously had Briar coming into Pro Tour. Prism. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Prism just hit Living Legend, which means it is a new day in the world of Flesh and Blood. It is the meta is the Wild West. We have a question from Tommy Fresh, host of the Fresh and Bloods pod. Shout out to Tommy. He asks, does Prism Living Legends change your outlook on Briar for national season?
I mean, it definitely impacts things for sure. Like Prism is probably one of Briar's best matchups. You know, when I saw that I was playing Ian in the top 8, although I know Ian is a very strong player, he unfortunately lost a winning in for the last top 8 of the previous Pro Tour. So I was really happy to see him get there. And it almost went awry actually, because as we sat down for draft on day 2 of the Pro Tour, they were announcing all the players that hadn't made it to their draft seat in time to try and confirm their attendance. And I heard them say Ian Zhang, and I was like, wait, where's Ian? Ian's 6-1. I was like trying to message people to be like, where the hell is Ian? And it turned out he just accidentally sat down in the wrong draft seat. Like, thankfully, because I remember I saw him, I was like, did everything get sorted with your draft? He's like, yeah, I 3'd the pod. I was like, oh, nice. But like he was, you know, like he's a really good player, but I was happy to see him on Prism, you know, because I think that matchup really favors me. And we saw, you know, there's a massive life differential in the game, and he ended up trying to resort to fatigue basically as his only out, because he wasn't able to get control of the board with auras, and he wasn't able to race me in any way, shape, or form. And so I think my Briar version specifically is really strong into Prism, or was really strong into Prism, because you get to use the creepers to really take advantage of generating extra action points to deal with multiple auras in a turn, or to potentially play around ALS. And so that sort of gave that, you know, having one really great matchup that was probably overrepresented because there's just so many, you know, there's so many Prism waifu lovers out there that
there's a lot of sad people this week.
Yeah, I'm sad. Honestly, I'm sad. I qualified for the first Pro Tour playing Prism, and I really just think she's a really interesting and fun deck. And I was actually kind of sad that they made the bans and changes they did before the first Pro Tour, because like if it was just Starvo at the Pro Tour, I would have been really happy to play Prism, and I just loved playing it. So it was, you know, I was like, oh man, I have to find a new deck. But you know, we move on and we find a new queen, and that queen for this one was Briar. Is she worse? I mean, she's lost one good matchup. Does that make her bad? Absolutely not. I don't think that Briar has particularly many bad matchups. I think it has some questionable ones, potentially in probably Bravo and Dorinthia. Do both of those decks get a lot better in a world where Prism doesn't exist? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely they do. But we've never had, you know, had to have the resources. We've never had the resources or had to have the resources to deal with those decks, really. So as much as they get to come out of the woodwork and battle us, we also get to spend the time and effort and sideboard slots to try and beat them. So I think that'll be an interesting like battle this season. And I think that people probably shouldn't underestimate Dorinthia going into this season. I think she's like kind of a bit sleeper. She still has some like questionable matchups in probably Oldhim is like the big one. But if you can kind of crack the Oldhim matchup, I actually do think Dorinthia is quite scary, which is kind of a weird thing to be saying. But like Glistening Steelblade from the classic battles was actually a massive upgrade for the deck. It's like, I remember everyone was kind of disappointed, myself too, because we didn't get to see like loads of new Rhinar cards. Because I was like, finally, it's Brutes time in the sun. They're going to get like some new toy, and it's going to be, the Brutes will rejoice. But no such luck. But Dorinthia actually got something really good and a big upgrade. And I think both in CC potentially right now, but definitely in Blitz as well. She's actually really underrated. So like, that's actually kind of a tough matchup. Like a skilled Dorinthia player, or if you're an unskilled Briar player like myself, like I played a bunch of games into Tower number 9 on Dorinthia, and he was just farming me. He was just absolutely farming me.
Yeah, he's like a one trick. Tower is like the Dorinthia main. He's been playing forever. I don't think he's updated his deck in a year, but he still knows how to run it.
Yeah, I think he was like 5-1 or something, and I was like, man, I'm glad that guy's not playing the Pro Tour. And like, so like there is bad matchups out there, and like some of those bad matchups might start to rise up. Maybe like Bravo playing Crush the Week, or like because like one thing I was thinking before the Pro Tour was like, if I play Bravo, I'm not that scared of it, Like it's okay, and we are a more efficient and more powerful deck than them. Like they disrupt quite well, but like it's not that bad. And even if they have Crushed the Week for like Briar, they're probably not going to play it into me, because most Briars don't play that many 3-power attacks, right? I do. My deck's basically all 3-power attacks. I really hope they don't play a fucking Crush the Week into me. Excuse my language.
You're all good.
We've already sworn once in this pod. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Sorry. I've been trying to keep it PG, but I've failed. But so, like, I have not played against Crush the Week Bravo. And I mean, that is a risk for the Bravos to take, because, if you put Crush the Week in your deck and they're playing the normal Briar deck, suddenly you have a 3-for-7 in your deck, and it's not some powerhouse card that you want it to be. It's just a 3-for-7, and that's okay. Yeah. But, not life-changing. So it's an adjustment on their part, because maybe not everyone ends up on Belittle Briar. Maybe people play some of the more conservative, more normal versions. I've had a lot of feedback from other people being like, I tried to play your deck and it just seemed terrible to me, and I'm like, maybe you just don't believe in the tomes enough, maybe you're not willing to flip. Maybe because in the Briar deck, there's a lot of turns where you start your turn with no idea what your hand is. Yep. You're going to draw 3 cards, you're going to cast a Sonata, you're going to flip a tome, like you're going to play a Belittle. Like you haven't seen any of the cards that you're going to play with this turn, and you just have to be like, right, well, good luck to me, and like go into your turn and sequence your way through and find what comes out on the other side. So it's not always, I think there are bad matchups that are coming out, and obviously Briar will have a bigger target on its back now, especially. But I still think that Briar deck is really exceptional, and I don't think that we've reached like the end game for exploration in Briar either. I still think there's a bunch of interesting directions that you can innovate the deck, and there's still a lot of work that can be done. So I'm actually really excited to do that work, and I'm not locked on playing Briar for my nationals, but I wouldn't be unhappy if I was. Yep. I would love another chance to try and get that girl some Living Legend points,
She's doing well for you so far.
She has.
All right. This next community question comes actually from somebody from my local, Hugh. The first part's it's a 2-part question. The first part's a little cheeky question. He's a big deck builder, and he likes to build janky decks. And so the first part of his question goes, have you ever been killed by a blue overload? But then the second part of his question... Oh, you have?
Yep. No, I never have.
Okay.
And I pray to God.
Son of a bitch!
And I pray to God I never will. I really hope I don't go out that way. That sounds rough.
It's funny because I myself have actually been killed at the hand of one of his blue overloads. He was playing with this cheeky little prism list where he'd go red transmogrify into blue overload, and.
Dear God.
Oh, no.
Like, he doesn't have to be a blue either. He just does it just for the sick rubbing.
Oh, it's pure.
Just to really punish it.
It's purely because he can. He just wants to watch the world burn.
I mean, that does sound like something that would burn.
Yeah.
He'll dominate forever.
But the second part of this question, and the serious part of the question is, what hero gains the most from Prism hitting LL?
That's close. It's really close because a lot of heroes gain.
For sure.
Like Prism is oppressive in the matchups where it's good. And that's actually what made like Prism kind of a viable bring, is because you just have so many matchups where like, oh my god, these decks are unplayable in the matchup. Like Icelander, like the stats that and I go back to the stats again, they're not always like 100% accurate and fully representative of a matchup. They don't say everything, but the Icelander Prism matchup stats are about 90% in favor of Prism. The stats aren't everything, but 90% is 90%. So like maybe it's Icelander. Maybe like having almost a literal buy, or almost a literal auto loss turn like deleted from the field is maybe enough. And we saw Scott Mines, another British player. He came 13th, I believe, in the calling in Lille, playing Icelander. So I think there's certainly some interesting stuff that can be done with that deck. So I would probably say Icelander. That's my bet, because I think she had the specifically worst. Obviously, the Guardians, Dorinthia, they're gaining, but I'm going to say Icelander is the one that gains the most.
Excellent. That's who I'm most excited to play moving forward.
All right. I'm going to jump to the last community question real quick. Unless you want to, I don't want to drag it out too long, but lightning round, Uprising draft, good or trash?
Trash.
Fair enough. The last community question, I think, is a good way to wrap up the interview. Clark Jansen, Bravo aficionado, friend of the pod, asks, tell us what you want us to know about you, for the people who don't know you or haven't seen you play before.
I love Flesh and Blood. Like, I really love playing card games, and like it means so much to me to have been able to win the Pro Tour. Like, it's genuinely an honor, and like I hope that like people could see, like, just from watching me, how much it meant to me to be able to have that opportunity, right? Because it is like an incredible opportunity, and it took so much luck, but also hard work and like actual years of dedication. Because I've played card games competitively for about the best part of a decade at this point. Like, I've really put basically all of my time, energy, and life force in one way or another into playing games seriously for basically a decade. And so like, for it all to combine into a moment and a day where like it was my day, like, is insane. It's awesome. Like, that's such a beautiful thing. And like I hope that like people can like see that, enjoy that, and say like, I would like to pursue competition for that reason, because it's like competing and trying to get the best out of yourself and like really pushing yourself to the limit to try and be as good as possible is like such a rewarding thing, And I think people don't necessarily always like actually push themselves as hard as they can in competition. But like, for me, that's where I've always got the most from things. And so like, I would encourage people to do the same, like try and qualify for the Pro Tour. Like, the Flesh and Blood Pro Tour is magical, like it's so good. So there you go. That would be it's not just about me, but it's sort of, I guess, about Flesh and Blood as well. But like I looked in, like I was so happy and so excited. You mentioned earlier Alex from Fabled Academy's deck tech I did with him after the Pro Tour.
Yep.
I had a couple of comments either on that video or people that messaged me directly being like, hey man, what were you on when you won the Pro Tour? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you weren't sober, right? Like, you'd taken something, right? I was like, I don't understand what you mean. They're like, I watched your interview and your eyes were just so wide. I was like, what?
No, I was like, no, that serotonin just.
Yeah, no, I was like, that's just an insane amount of dopamine just flying through my brain, because I'm just like gleeful beyond belief, because like all my wildest dreams just came true, So like, I'm just really like thankful. I said this to James White. I was like, I'm so thankful that you guys have made like something that I genuinely love, genuinely love, and like I hope people can appreciate me as someone who just really loves the same game that they do.
Awesome. All right, Matt. We appreciate you coming on. This is the spot where you are free to plug whatever you got going on. Give me the ats, give me the links, tell the world where they can find you.
My @ on Twitter is just Matthew Foulkes. You can just go and throw all hate or vitriol you want there. That's what it's for. No, please don't. But that is where I am at. I offer coaching. That I don't think there's many people out there, at least that offer the service that are on the same level as I am. I think I could really help a lot of people. You know, if you're a newer player, I've helped a fair few newer players. I've had a couple of people who I taught the game qualify for the Pro Tour less than a week after I taught them. So, and I can't guarantee those results, but that is true. 2 people who I taught the game qualified for the PT less than a week after. So
the results are there, folks.
You know, that's just a snippet of what could be yours. But no, like I think I can either, whether it's preparation for a single tournament or, you know, lessons on a specific deck or, you know, just general lessons about how to improve and how to think about Flesh and Blood. I think I'm a decent teacher, and I think that I am probably the best out there in terms of helping people actually improving. And I'm a pretty open book when it comes to giving out basically all the information that I have in helping people. Like anyone that was working with my coaching had access to my deck list for this Pro Tour, you know? Like that's, like I was pretty like open with everyone. And I had people being like, man, this deck's so fun. And then like it was so sick to have all these people who had also been following and I'd been working with, like rooting for me. And so that was really cool. That's about it. I don't really do too much else. I just play a lot of Flesh and Blood. If you see Big Dog Diggers on Flesh and Blood Online, you know,
all right.
It's unfortunate for you that you had to play versus me. Sorry for your loss.
I definitely lost that one if I played you.
Thank you for watching. There you go. That would be everything I got.
Excellent. So his links will be in the show notes below when we post the video. So Matt, just yep. And so we're gonna wrap it up here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell notification to find the Combat Chain. On the Combat Chain YouTube channel, you can find us at the Combat Chain Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at the Combat Chain. You can find myself at Pat Smashgood, and you can find Adam at Fomtoolery TCG. Now, Matthew, we have one more piece of business to close this thing out. We like to close it out a very particular way. Okay. I'm gonna say until next week, and in unison, we're going to say we are closing the Combat Chain, and it's going to come out harmonious and beautiful, and it's going to be the best thing ever. Is that something?
Right, just one more time, so I'm ready.
All right, so I'm going to say until next week, and then we're all going to say we are closing the Combat Chain. There it is. Okay, ready? Here we go. All right, guys. Thank you very much, Matthew, folks. Thank you for coming on to the pod, and I think this is going to do it for us. So, until next week, we're closing the Combat Chain. Oh, nailed it. That's a wrap.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for coming on. This was great.